Hello, hello to my video about Treasure Island, or to be more precise, my video about my reading of the novel Treasure Island. Whenever I finish a book on this channel, I make a sort of kind of afterthoughts video in which I talk about the book, my reading, what I learned during the reading, my experiences, and whatever else comes to my mind. In some cases, I provide a little bit of background information about the book, about the author. In other cases, the video is more personal. This video will be a bit of both, right? In the first part, I will talk about the book, about the author, influences that led to the book, etc., etc. And in the second, much shorter part of this video, I will talk about my experiences while recording this reading, what changed, some technical stuff also for those of you who are interested. So, yeah, let's start. Treasure Island, the novel, was written by Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson, who is one of the most translated authors in the world. His most notable works are, of course, Treasure Island, then the Gothic novella The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I already read on this channel some time ago, and you can find the whole reading in my playlists. Then there is his poetry collection, A Child's Garden of Verses, of which I also read some poems for my Sunday poem series. You will find the links, of course, in the description. And there's the novel titled Kidnapped that I haven't read yet. From what I learned, it was held in high regard, though, and was praised by writers as diverse as Henry James, Jorge Luis Borges, and I'm sorry for probably having butchered his name, and Hilary Mantel. I found it quite interesting to learn that the novel, while it seems to be a simple adventure story at first glance, nevertheless raised various moral issues. It deals with the nature of justice and the fact that friends may have different political viewpoints. So it seems to me that this novel would be quite an interesting read in these times of massive political dispute and division, right? On a side note, the full title of the novel was, and I have to read it off my tablet, Kidnapped, being memoirs of the adventure of David Balfour in the year 1751, how he was kidnapped and cast away, his sufferings in a desert isle, his journey in the wild highlands, his acquaintance with Alan Breck Stewart and other notorious Highland Jacobites, with all that he suffered at the hands of his uncle Ebenezer Balfour of Shaw's, falsely so called, written by himself and now set forth by Robert Louis Stevenson. And if that isn't a catchy title, then what, right? But, well, back to Treasure Island. The novel was originally called The Sea Cook, a story for boys. I think Treasure Island is a much punchier title, isn't it? I don't know if people would have been that intrigued with the original title. The novel was first published not as a novel, but in 17 weekly installments from 1881 to 1882 in the children's magazine Young Folks under the pseudonym Captain George North. Back then under the title Treasure Island or The Mutiny of the Hispaniola. In November 1883, it was eventually published as a book and has since then took off. It turned out to be Stevenson's first financial and critical success. One of the book's biggest fans was William Ewart Gladstone, who was the British Prime Minister during this time. But it didn't stop there. Treasure Island became the most often dramatized and adapted novel ever, and we find adaptations in all sorts of media. I will talk about the adaptations a bit later, what this novel led to, who was inspired by it, etc., etc. Let's first talk about how Stevenson came to write it, though. During the 19th century, sea novels were very, very popular. Navy novels with adventures and realistic settings and historical events, but also desert island romances with shipwrecked or marooned characters that had to deal with pirates on treasure hunts or dangerous natives. One of the first popular stories of this kind was Defoe's Robinson Crusoe in 1719. Later, we have books such as Sir Walter Scott's The Pirate from 1822, Cooper's The Pilot from 1823, Poe's Message Found in a Bottle in 1833, and later also The Gold Bug from 1843, which all had an impact on Stevenson's book. And Treasure Island was the pinnacle of this genre, and I think it is safe to say that Treasure Island influenced the way we see pirates and piracy, how pirates and pirates' life is depicted nowadays, like none other book before. Deserted tropical islands, maps on which a treasure is marked with an X, right? Seamen with just one leg and parrots on their shoulders, that all derive from this one book. But, well, this book was also a combination and also very much inspired by already existing literature, as we talked about, right? It was influenced by lore and historical events. It was a retelling of and a reinvention of what was there before. According to historian Louis Junco, the plot or the background plot of Treasure Island is based on a combination of the historical story of the murder of Captain George Glass on board of the Earl of Sandwich and the taking of the ship Walrus near the island of La Graciosa near Tenerife. Walrus, as we know, was also the name of Captain Flint's ship in Treasure Island. It is said that the pirates of La Graciosa buried their treasure on this very island and in a violent battle with the British Navy were all killed there. The treasure was never found. Stevenson himself admitted freely that some of the ideas of the book were borrowed from already existing literature. The idea of the pointing skeleton is from Poe's short story The Gold Bug, that I mentioned before, and Billy Bones's history was inspired by a Washington Irving story, and Washington Irving was one of Stevenson's favorite writers. And this part was specifically borrowed from the Money Diggers part of Tales of a Traveler. The initial inspiration, though, came from a real-life event in Stevenson's life. Together with his stepson Lloyd, he drew a map of an imaginary island while on holiday, and it is said that this spawned the idea for his novel, which he wanted to become, quote, the best book about buccaneers that can be had, based on, another quote, a map and a treasure and a mutiny and a derelict ship. Speaking of derelict, this is the title of a poem by US-American writer Young E. Allison, which is based on the fragments of the fictional song 15 Men on the Dead Man's Chest in Stevenson's novel, and Allison expanded it to a poem of several stanzas. And just as it happened, this was last Sunday's Sunday poem on my channel. A pretty dark and gory adaptation, and if you want to listen to it, the link is somewhere up here and, of course, also in the description. And with this cough, brilliant transition, let's talk about adaptations. Many of you will know the 1950s Disney live-action movie Treasure Island, and this is the German version of it. And for many of you, this might have been the first contact with this book. It definitely was for me. I saw the movie before I read the book. But there were many more movie adaptations, among others, at least 2 silent movie versions. And what I found quite interesting is that in the 1920 silent movie adaptation, the lead character, Jim Hawkins, was played by a woman, actress Shirley Mason. And Long John Silver was played by Charles Ogle, who, 10 years prior to this, starred as Frankenstein's monster in the movie adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, produced by none other than the American inventor and businessman Thomas Alva Edison. Did you know that Thomas Alva Edison had a movie studio? Well, he was really a jack of all trades. But there is more than movies. There is music. There are TV, theater, and radio adaptations. One of them by, well, who else? Orson Welles, of course, right? There are all sorts of audio adaptations. There are comic books, even by Disney, Marvel, and Dark Horse. And there are video games. A 1985 one called Treasure Island and a 1999 one titled La Isla del Tesoro de R.L. Stevenson, both of which are directly based on the novel, and there are quite a couple more that are loosely based on it or reference it. And the most notable one, of course, is Monkey Island and its sequels. While Ron Gilbert, the original creator of Monkey Island, said that Tim Power's book On Stranger Tides from 1987 was the main influence, Treasure Island is nevertheless very present in the Monkey Island games, with various references to the book. I have to say I obsessed over The Secret of Monkey Island when it came out in 1990, and I obsessed over Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, and all the later parts. And when I say obsessed, I mean it. And I was not the only one. A whole generation was influenced by these games. And this month, October 2022, proved that this is not over. Just this week, I finished Return to Monkey Island on my Nintendo Switch, which came out this month. Well, the game, not the Switch. The Switch is older, right? And yes, I do have the horse armor, just in case you wondered. Fiction inspires other fiction, no matter in which type of media. And reality also inspires fiction, and fiction inspires people to do things in reality, not only to produce more fiction, and that all in the good and the bad. The way we imagine pirates today, and how pirates are depicted today in all sorts of media, is largely based on one book, Treasure Island. That, on the other hand, had a multitude of influences, both coming out of reality and of other fiction. And these influences were inspired by others before. Literature is, well, art is, an ever-evolving process, and since art, no matter which type of art, is always the product of a unique view on certain topics and always a product of its time, it allows us to have a glimpse into the mindset of people living during this time. Sure, what we do is to interpret this by using our own knowledge and our own experiences, our upbringing and education, so our own interpretations are also a unique product of our own mindsets and therefore also of our time. And this is what, at least for me, makes art and literature, among other things, so fascinating. This is the end of the first part, and in the second part, I will now talk about my reading, my experiences, my expectations, in short, what I learned by doing this reading. First of all, I really enjoyed this book, and I hope this translated to you who watched and listened. I loved the story. I loved the characters, and I loved to do the different voices. I prefer audiobooks that have a bit of acting in them with distinct characters that have different voices and different cadences in talking. And from the feedback I got over the more than 2 years that I run this channel, I learned that I'm not alone in this. Sure, this is personal preference. There's nothing better in one way or the other, and I totally get it when some people prefer other types of readings, but that's the great thing about the internet, right? Everyone will find what they like, and that is just plain wonderful. As for the technical aspects, those of you who have been following along this channel a bit longer may have realized a big change. But two big changes. Actually, three big changes. Number one, the audio is now louder and finally follows some technical standards. Over the first 5 or 6 chapters, the audio quality also improved quite drastically. And this is thanks to the incredible generous feedback I got from Katie Bryson and her husband, who took the time and gave me some wonderful, valuable technical advice. So thank you again. I cannot thank you enough. I learned so much by this. I'm still not 100% there, but I'm constantly improving and tweaking the audio here and there, and I think I made a big step in the right direction. The next big change was that with this book, I always posted complete chapters. In the past, I split up chapters in many cases because I simply couldn't record one whole chapter in one go due to multiple reasons, sometimes simply due to the lack of time, sometimes due to outside interference. I also think this improves the listenability. So big thanks go to Boris, whom I had some really wonderful and valuable conversations with, and which eventually led to this decision. The third change was due to the work on the audio and the decision to always post whole chapters, because I had to import audio and video anyway to my computer, so I decided to also edit out slips of the tongue and sometimes even redo certain parts that I realized are more effective when read in a slightly different way. And I think this also improved the overall quality. This all led to a decrease in my posting frequency, though, because the editing is quite time consuming, and that even though I literally only edited out certain parts. But importing the footage, working with the audio, and the video rendering takes a long time. A 15-minute chapter, just for you to get a glimpse into how long this really took, right? A 15-minute chapter or something easily took 2 hours or more to produce. So 15 minutes reading or 20 minutes reading, right? And then importing the video and the audio improvement, editing, rendering it out, easily 2 hours. And I couldn't do this every day of the week. Also, this led to a tremendous amount of data. My Treasure Island folder on my computer is now 300 gigabytes big. And now that I finished the book, I can finally delete the raw footage, only keeping the final videos. What still bugs me, and it bugs me a lot, is that here and there my camera lost focus. I don't monitor myself, so I don't see what I do, right? Or whether the camera is in focus. So I only see these problems during the editing process. And since I edited the videos usually a day later, redoing the bits wasn't possible, or else I wouldn't have been able to post it. So I do have to change my setup a bit, specifically changing the light and the position of the microphone so that the focusing issues will hopefully be a thing of the past within the next readings. I hope the focusing issues were not too distracting. As for editing, I switched to different software. First, I used Shotcut for video editing, then finally decided to use Kdenlive, which is a fantastic freeware software option. So if you're looking for freeware video editing software, you might want to take a look at Kdenlive. I used to work with Premiere Pro, but the monthly fee became a tad too costly for me, I have to admit. And I've been experimenting with more affordable software like HitFilm, which is great software, and also DaVinci Resolve, but finally started using Kdenlive. All the audio work is done with PreSonus Studio One Artist, which I bought specifically for this project and that I really learned to love. It was a steep learning curve, I have to admit, but a very beneficial one. I found PreSonus Studio One Artist. It's the slightly more affordable solution, which is absolutely fine for me. I don't miss a thing in this software. It has some really interesting features, specifically also for voice based projects like podcasts or something I do here. So something you might want to take a look at if you're interested in audio or working with audio. Some might have realized that I switched microphones. I used the Neat King B first and then started to use the Lewitt LCT 440 Pure. I love both of these mics a lot, but found the Lewitt more fitting for this project. So much for the tech part. What will be the next book? I have a couple of books in mind. I don't know yet what it will be. I have to say, though, that with Treasure Island, the classic adventure story, and before that, Dracula, one of the horror stories, I lean a tad towards science fiction. And there are 2 or 3 books that are very high on my list. Whatever it will be, I will start the book next week because I'm currently working on something special, which I had to postpone a couple of times due to technical problems, but that I'm very, very excited about. Till then, see you, hear you, read you, and I forgot to mention, for those of you who are interested, I started a German channel as well. I won't be posting as frequently as on this one, but, well, you might want to check it out. Maybe the link is also in the description. So this one's for today. Bye-bye. Till next time.